That Tuesday was the first time Mark called me by another name. We were sitting in the kitchen, separated by the table and the remains of dinner, cold pasta, half-drunk wine, breadcrumbs on the oilcloth, when he looked up from his phone and said, "Catherine, pass the salt." I reached for the salt shaker, and only when my fingers closed around the cold glass did the meaning of his words pierce the weariness of the workday. "Catherine, I'm not Catherine. I'm Laura. We've been married for 6 years, and he's never called me by another name." I set the salt shaker down. The glass hit the wood with a loud thud. "What did you say?" Mark blinked, slowly, like someone emerging from deep thought. "Salt, Laura. I asked for salt. Are you okay?" His face was concerned, loving, so familiar that I almost convinced myself I'd misheard. Almost. I gave him the salt shaker and remained silent for the rest of dinner, listening to his breathing and the scrape of his fork on his plate. That night, I lay awake, replaying his voice, the intonation, the movement of his lips in my head. He said Catherine so casually, as if he'd said the name hundreds of times, as if it had been lurking under his tongue and simply slipped out, like a pin from a pocket, accidental yet predictable. I didn't know any Catherine. We didn't know anyone in common with that name. I checked his phone while he was in the shower, embarrassed, clammy, humiliating, and found nothing. No messages, no calls, no contacts. 3 days later, he did it again. We were at the supermarket, pushing a cart between the aisles of canned goods, and he asked, "Kat, do you remember if we bought tomato paste?" This time, I didn't correct him. I simply looked at his profile, his straight nose, his light stubble, the wrinkle around his eye that appeared when he smiled. He wasn't smiling now. His face was relaxed, ordinary, the face of a man talking to his wife. "To Catherine." I put the tomato paste in the cart and smiled. "Understood." My voice was even, and that scared me more than the stranger's name. Why had I played along? Because I wanted to see what would happen next? Because I was afraid that if I corrected him, he would look at me as if he didn't recognize me? At home, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at the mirror for a long time. From the depths of the glass, Laura Miller, 31 years old, with brown eyes and a mole above her left eyebrow, stared back at me. But something had changed in the reflection. Not her appearance, perhaps the angle of her head or the way the light fell on her cheekbones. But for a second, I saw a strange face. Or rather, mine, but as if it were on someone else. I shook my head, turned on the cold water, and washed my face. My skin burned. In bed, Mark hugged me in his usual way, his arms around my waist, his breath brushing the back of my neck. His body was warm and familiar, smelling of soap and metal. He was fixing the faucet in the kitchen. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. I didn't answer. I listened to him fall asleep, waiting for him to say something else. A name, not mine, but he remained silent. The next day, I found a photograph in his sock drawer. Small, the size of a business card, scratched, as if it had been in his wallet for a long time. It was of a woman with my face. The same brown eyes, the same mole above her eyebrow. But her hair was short, like a boy's, and she was wearing a leather jacket, which I never wore. She stood against the ocean, squinting in the sun, smiling. Her smile was my smile. On the back, in Mark's familiar handwriting, was written, "Catherine, Santa Monica, 2019. In 2019, Mark and I had just started dating. We hadn't been to Santa Monica. We'd never even been to the West Coast. I turned the photo over again, peering into the woman's face. It was me, and not me. I placed the photo next to my reflection on the dark phone screen. Our features matched perfectly, right down to the tiny scar on my chin from a bike accident. But I didn't remember this photo. I didn't remember the short haircut. I didn't remember the ocean. That evening, Mark returned from work later than usual. He was animated, talking about some project, laughing, kissing the top of my head as he passed. I sat on the couch, clutching the photo in my fist, waiting for the right moment. And when he fell silent, pouring himself a whiskey, I asked, "Who is Catherine?" His hand, holding the bottle, froze mid-motion. Time stretched out like an elastic band. He slowly placed the bottle on the table and turned to me. His face was calm, too calm, like the sea before a storm. "What are you talking about?" I unclenched my fist and showed him the photograph. "I found this among your things." "Who is she?" Mark looked at the photograph, then at me. His gaze slid over my face, forehead, eyes, chin, like a scanner, searching for discrepancies. "It's you, Laura. Don't you remember? Santa Monica, 3 years ago. You had short hair then. We went away for the weekend. You said it was the best day of your life." I looked at him and felt the floor shift beneath my feet. I didn't remember. Absolutely. Completely. I remembered a different 2019, a rainy autumn in Boston, awkward first dates, the smell of wet pavement, and his jacket reeking of tobacco, even though he didn't smoke. No Santa Monica. No crew cut. No, Catherine. My name isn't Catherine, I whispered. Mark frowned. He looked genuinely puzzled. I know. You're Laura. I never called you Catherine. Are you sure you're feeling okay? He reached out and touched my forehead, taking my temperature. His palm was warm and dry, and the touch made me want to cry, because I knew he was lying. Or maybe not. I went to the bedroom, citing a headache. I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. Behind the wall, Mark was rattling dishes in the kitchen, and every sound echoed in my temples. I reminisced over the past weeks, months, years. I looked for gaps, inconsistencies, moments when my memory might have been distorted. And I found them. Tiny cracks in the smooth surface of our life together. Things out of place. Conversations I didn't remember. Friends staring at me a little longer than usual, as if checking to see if I was who they expected. At 3 a.m, I woke to Mark talking in his sleep. His voice was quiet and monotone, the words flowing like a stream, from which I made out only one thing, a name. Catherine. He said it tenderly, longingly, with an intonation he reserved only for me. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to my husband calling for another woman in his sleep, a woman with my face. That morning, I found photos on my phone I hadn't taken. Santa Monica, the ocean, a short haircut. My lips stretched into a smile. The date was April 2019. I scrolled further. Hundreds of photos of me, living a life I don't remember. Me, happy against the sunset. Me, laughing in Mark's arms. Me, listed in his contacts as Catherine. I didn't wake Mark. I got up, got dressed, and grabbed the car keys. I needed to find the woman who stole my face, or understand why I stole her life. San Francisco greeted me with rain. I hadn't been here in 5 years, since Mark and I moved to Portland. The city had changed, or I had changed, but the streets seemed narrower, the shadows longer. I rode in a cab from the airport, staring at the wet pavement, trying to remember why I'd decided to fly here in the first place. The answer was in my bag, an old dry cleaning receipt found in Mark's coat pocket. It had an address in the Mission District and a date on it. A month ago, he said he was on a business trip to Denver. The hotel was cheap and impersonal. Beige walls, a carpet that smelled of bleach, a painting of a sailboat over the bed. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sank beneath me with a soft groan. It was raining outside, and the trolleys hummed. I pulled out my phone and opened photos I no longer remembered. Santa Monica, April 2019. Short hair, leather jacket, smile. My smile. I zoomed in, examining the details. A mole above her eyebrow, a scar on her chin, all mine. But there was something alien in her eyes. Not a color, not a shape, an expression. That's what people look like when they know something you don't. I called Mark. He answered on the third ring, his voice sleepy. Laura, what time is it? Where are you? I pictured him sitting on our bed, disheveled, wearing an old t-shirt with the logo of a band we listened to the first year we met. I'm in San Francisco, I said. I have a question. Why is there a receipt from the dry cleaner on Mission Street in your coat if you were in Denver? Silence. Long, thick as molasses. I could hear his breathing, ragged, uneven. Laura, let's talk when you get back. This isn't a phone conversation. Answer now. Another pause. I wasn't in Denver. I was here. I have business here. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I stood up, walked to the window, and pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Rain trickled down it in rivulets, distorting the city lights. Business. In San Francisco. Secretly from me. And this woman, Catherine, with my face, is she here too? Or is she everywhere I look, reflected in store windows and puddles, wearing my clothes, sleeping in my bed, answering my calls? In the morning, I went to the address listed on the receipt. The dry cleaners turned out to be a tiny diner, squeezed between a Vietnamese diner and a used electronics store. Behind the counter stood an elderly Chinese woman with gray hair pulled back into a bun. I showed her the receipt. She stared at it for a long moment through her glasses, then nodded and disappeared into the back of the store. She returned with a clear plastic bag. Inside was a woman's dress. Not mine. I'd never seen one before. Dark blue, with a lace collar, old-fashioned, like from another era. I took it out of the bag. The fabric was cold and slippery. It smelled of lavender and something else, sweet, cloying, like the perfume my grandmother used to wear. "Who brought this?" I asked. The woman shrugged. "A man. Tall, dark. He picks up clothes every month. Women's clothes. All sizes. I thought it was for his wife." I clutched the dress in my hands. The fabric wrinkled, the lace cutting into my palm. "What did he say?" The Chinese woman frowned, remembering. "Catherine," he said. "Order it for Catherine Miller." Miller, my maiden name. I walked out of the dry cleaners and into the street. The rain had stopped, but the air remained damp and heavy. I stood there, clutching the strange dress to my chest, watching the cars pass. One thought swirled in my head. He was creating her, piece by piece. Clothes, a name, photographs, memories. He was building the woman I should become, or the woman I once was, but no longer was. I found a cafe across the street, sat by the window, and ordered coffee. My dress lay on the chair next to me. I opened my laptop and logged into Mark's email. I knew the password. We never hid passwords from each other. Or so I thought. Among work emails and bills, I found a folder titled K. Miller. Inside were dozens of documents. Scans of a driver's license under the name Catherine Miller. My photo, but the address was in San Francisco. Bank statements, insurance policy, and medical records from Pacific Heights Clinic. I opened the last file. Diagnosis, dissociative identity disorder. Recommendations, continue therapy, avoid triggers, maintain a stable environment. I read and reread these words, and they made no sense. Dissociative disorder, multiple personality. Is this a diagnosis for me? Or for her? Or for both of us? I am Laura. I remember my childhood in Oregon. I remember college. I remember my first job. I remember meeting Mark at a bar in Portland. I remember our wedding at City Hall. I remember every year of our life together. I couldn't be anyone else. But the photos on my phone, the dress at the dry cleaners, the receipts, the documents, everything said otherwise. There was a Catherine Miller who lived in San Francisco, wore blue lace dresses, and was married to Mark. Or was it me? I called the clinic, pretended to want an appointment with the same doctor. The receptionist checked her records. Dr. Reynolds saw Catherine Miller, but unfortunately, the patient passed away 2 years ago. Car accident. I'm so sorry. I thanked her and hung up. 2 years ago, 2022, a year before Mark first called me Catherine. 2 years before I found the photos. Catherine Miller is dead. And so I sit in a cafe in San Francisco, as if in her image, holding her dress in my hands. And my husband whispers her name every night. I closed my laptop. The coffee had gone cold. It had started raining again outside. I looked at my reflection in the dark cafe window and saw the face of a dead woman. My lips moved, uttering a silent question. Who am I? My phone vibrated. A message from Mark. I love you. Please come home. I'll explain everything. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again. I'll come tomorrow. Don't call me. I sent it. I turned off my phone. That evening, I sat in my hotel room, sorting through Catherine's things. The dress, the receipts, the printouts of her medical records. I tried to piece her back together like a puzzle. She lived in the Mission District, went to the dry cleaners, to Dr. Reynolds, loved the smell of lavender and the color blue. She was married to Mark, and she was me, or I was her. Or we were two halves of one fragmented consciousness, one half killed in a car accident, the other living on, unaware of its loss. That night I had a dream. I was sitting in the passenger seat of a car. Mark was driving. He laughed and reached out to kiss me. His hand rested on my knee, warm and familiar. In the rearview mirror, I saw my face, short hair, leather jacket. I smiled. And then, the bright headlights of an oncoming car, the screech of brakes, the impact, and darkness. I woke up in a cold sweat. The clock said 3:47. I sat up in bed, hugged my knees, and stared into the darkness. The blue dress lay on a chair in the corner of the room. Was it my imagination, or did the dress move slightly, as if someone had touched it? I turned on the light. The dress lay motionless, but the scent of lavender grew stronger. Tomorrow I would return to Portland. To Mark. To the man who buried one wife and married another without a word. Or to the man who loved one woman, and when she died, found another with the same face, to continue loving her, calling her by another name. I didn't know which was scarier. I lay down again, but didn't sleep until dawn. I listened to the rain, the footsteps in the hallway, and the soft, barely audible whisper from the air vents. "Catherine." It was Mark's voice, or my own. The plane landed in Portland in the gray twilight. I didn't tell Mark about the flight. I just took a taxi and went home, clutching the bag with Catherine's blue dress to my chest. The city outside the window seemed alien. The same streets, the same maple trees, the same tram tracks, but everything was shrouded in a haze, as if I were looking through dirty glass. The taxi driver said something about the weather, but I wasn't listening. I was thinking about the woman whose face was on me and the man waiting for me in a house full of her things. Mark opened the door before I could even insert the key. He looked haggard, stubble, red eyes, a wrinkled shirt, as if he hadn't slept in the entire time I was gone. "Laura," he sighed, reaching out to hug me. I took a step back. His arms hung in the air, and for a moment he looked like a puppet whose strings had snapped. "We need to talk," I said, and entered the living room. He sat across from me, hunched over, staring at the floor. I waited. The silence was heavy as water. Finally, he spoke, his voice sounding like he was struggling to get each word out. "Catherine was my wife. We met in college, married at 23, moved to San Francisco. She was you. Well, not you. She had your face. Or you had hers. I don't know how to explain it." He paused, rubbing his face with his palms. "She died 2 years ago. She swerved into oncoming traffic, rain, wet roads. I was driving. I survived. She didn't." I listened, and every detail matched my dream. The oncoming car, the screeching brakes, the darkness. After the accident, I couldn't stay in San Francisco. I moved to Portland, changed jobs, tried to start over. And then one day, I saw you at a cafe. You were standing in line, laughing at something on your phone, and my heart sank. You were her spitting image. Not just similar, identical. Same birthmark, same scar, same voice. I walked up to her and said, "You didn't recognize me." He looked up. Tears welled up in his eyes. "I know it's crazy. I should have told you right away. But I was afraid you'd leave. I couldn't lose her again. I'm confused. I've always been confused." I was silent. My temples throbbed. I remembered our first date. The way he'd stared at me too intently. The way his hand trembled when he touched my face. I remembered strange moments. How he'd sometimes call me Cat, and then immediately correct himself. How he'd withdraw into himself while looking at the sea. How he'd keep photos on his phone I didn't remember. It wasn't cheating. It was a replacement. He wasn't lying to me. He was lying to himself, convincing himself that Catherine was back in my body. "Do you know who I am?" I finally asked. "Am I Laura Miller from Portland, or Catherine Miller, who survived the accident and forgot her entire life?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he stood, walked over to the bookcase, and pulled out an old shoebox. He handed it to me. Inside were documents. Mark and Catherine's marriage license, her driver's license, the same photo I'd seen on his phone, and a newspaper clipping about a traffic accident on Highway 101. 28-year-old woman killed instantly. Driver of other car hospitalized. The victim's name was Catherine Miller. "You're Laura," Mark said quietly. I checked. "You were born in Oregon. You have a sister in Eugene. You went to Portland State University. You're not Catherine. You just look alike. So much alike. I know it's wrong, but when I look at you, I see her, and I can't let go." I closed the box. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what I felt. Relief that I was still me, or horror that the last years of my life had been a play performed by a grieving widower. "Did you love me?" I asked. "Or is it she and me?" He didn't answer, and that answer was louder than any words. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest bedroom. I couldn't stand being in our shared bedroom anymore, and I heard a whisper, very close. "Catherine." I sat up in bed. The whisper was coming from the vent. I pressed my ear to the cold metal. Mark's voice, muffled, monotonous. "Catherine, forgive me. I'm trying. I love her, I really do. But she's not you." I pulled away from the vent. I felt sick. I was a substitute, a living monument to a dead woman. He married me not because he loved me, but because he couldn't let her go. His every touch, every kiss, every "I love you" was directed at her. I got up, got dressed, and grabbed my bag. A nightlight was burning in the hallway, and in its dim light, I saw a photograph on the wall, our wedding one. I was happy, in a white dress, Mark beside me. But now I noticed something I hadn't noticed before, his gaze. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me, somewhere in the distance, where Catherine was waiting. I left the house without saying goodbye. I got into the car and drove away, not knowing where. The city was asleep, the streets were empty, and only the rain pounded the roof. I stopped by the bridge, turned off the engine, and sat for a long time, looking at the dark water. I thought about Catherine, a woman I never knew, but whose life cast a shadow on mine. I thought about Mark, the man who loved a ghost and tried to resurrect him in my body. I thought about myself, that my memories might be real, but my life had been stolen from a dead woman. At dawn, I started the car and drove back. Not because I forgave, but because I needed to see the end of this story, or its continuation. When I entered the house, Mark was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by Catherine's things, dresses, photographs, letters. He looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not love, not grief, but a tired, exhausted acceptance. "I ruined everything," he said. "Yes," I replied, and I sat down next to him on the floor, amid the wreckage of two lives, hers and mine. We sat on the floor, amid the wreckage of someone else's life, and I felt reality thinning at the edges. Catherine's dresses lay around me, spread out like shed skin. The photographs looked at me through her eyes, my eyes. Mark was silent, his head resting on his bent knees. The only sound in the house was his breathing. I looked at the back of my head, at the gray strands I'd never noticed before, and tried to find something inside me. Anger, pity, love. But there was only emptiness, deep and cold, like the water under the bridge where I used to drive at dawn. He spoke first. "I tried to separate you. Every morning, I told myself, this is Laura. She's different. She has a different life, different habits." But by evening, I'd forgotten. You laugh the same way. You tilt your head when you listen the same way. You even smell the same, though your perfume is different. "I'm going crazy, Laura." He raised his head and looked at me with reddened eyes. Or maybe I've already gone crazy. I wanted to answer, but the words stuck in my throat. Because I, too, had begun to notice oddities. In recent months, I caught myself humming melodies I didn't know. I reached for things I'd never liked. Lavender tea, old Katharine Hepburn movies, the color blue. My hands found clothes in the closet I didn't remember buying. And one day, when I woke up, I didn't immediately recognize where I was, and my own name sounded foreign to me, as if someone else had spoken it. I chalked it up to stress. Now I wasn't so sure. Mark got up and left the room. He returned with a small tape recorder, an old one, with a tiny cassette inside. I recorded her voice. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I listened to it. He pressed a button. A woman's laughter came from the speaker, my laughter. "Mark, stop it. This is stupid." The voice was mine, the intonation was mine, but I didn't recognize the words. "What do you want for dinner?" "Pasta with basil, like always." I never made pasta with basil. I didn't like basil, but those words made my stomach clench with hunger. "Turn it off," I whispered. He turned it off. The silence returned, but now someone's voice echoed in it, my voice. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I tore off the newspapers I'd covered it with after San Francisco. A woman with my face stared back at me from the depths of the glass. I raised my hand, she did too, but there was something in her eyes I didn't feel in myself. Calm, confidence, knowledge. "Who are you?" I asked. The reflection's lips moved a split second after mine. "I am you, or you are me. We stopped being different long ago." I recoiled. Mark stood in the living room doorway, looking at me with horror that mirrored my own. "Did you see?" he asked. "She doesn't move like you." I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and threw it at the mirror. The glass shattered into pieces that clattered across the floor. My face was reflected in each shard. Dozens of faces, all looking at me with different expressions. Anger, sadness, mockery, tenderness. I fell to my knees among the shards and burst into tears. Mark came over, sat down next to me, and hugged me. His hands trembled. "We have to finish this," I said through my tears. "You have to let her go. Otherwise, she'll take me. Or I'll become her. I don't know where Laura ends and Catherine begins anymore." He was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and gathered Catherine's things, dresses, photographs, a tape recorder, documents, into a large cardboard box. "I can't let her go," he said quietly. "I tried. Every day. But she's everywhere. She's in you. She's in this house. She's in my head." He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. A decision. A terrible, final decision. "I know how to bring her back," he whispered. "She spoke to me in my dreams. I need you to remember. Remember that night. The accident. Everything." I stepped back. "What are you talking about? I don't remember any accident. I'm not Catherine, Mark. I'm Laura. I've never been to San Francisco until last week." He stepped toward me, and his expression changed. The tenderness vanished, leaving only a desperate, greedy desire. "You don't remember because you're blocking it out, but it can be fixed. She said you just need to remind me." He grabbed my shoulders. His fingers dug painfully into my skin. "Remember, the rain, Highway 101, the headlights of oncoming cars, the impact. Remember." I screamed, and at that moment, the darkness behind my eyes opened, and I saw wet asphalt, headlights, his hand on the wheel, and a face in the rearview mirror. My face, with short hair, distorted with horror. Impact, pain, silence. When I opened my eyes, Mark was kneeling before me, crying. "Catherine," he whispered, "are you back?" I looked at my hands. They were mine, but somewhere deep inside, in a part of my mind I hadn't noticed before, she lived. Catherine. She looked through my eyes at the man she loved and who had killed her, and she smiled. "Yes," I said in her voice. "I'm back." I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. 3 months had passed since the night Mark made me remember the accident, and since then I'd stopped understanding who woke up in this bed every morning. My face remained the same, brown eyes, a mole above my eyebrow, a scar on my chin, but my expression had changed. Sometimes, walking past shop windows, I'd catch a look in the reflection that wasn't mine. Calm, understanding, slightly mocking. Catherine's look. Mark was happy. For the first time in our marriage, he looked whole, at peace, as if he'd put in the missing piece of a puzzle. He no longer called me Laura, only Catherine, and I didn't correct him, because I no longer knew if I had the right to correct myself. He made pasta with basil, and I ate it, savoring the taste I once hated but now loved. He put on old movies, and I remembered every scene, even though I'd never seen them. He'd take my hand, and my fingers would find their way between his, not Lorino's, but Catherine's. The nights were the worst. I'd wake up at 3:47, the same time Mark said the accident happened, and lie awake, feeling someone else stirring inside me. She didn't speak to me with words. She just was, like an echo. I remembered things I'd never had. The smell of the ocean in Santa Monica, the taste of cheap wine on a rooftop in the Mission, the fear in Mark's eyes a second before the impact. I remembered dying. One day, I found her diary. It was in the same shoebox, under her driver's license and marriage certificate, a small leather notebook covered in neat handwriting. I opened it and read the first page. Mark says I sometimes forget things. Yesterday, I couldn't remember how we met. He laughed, but I saw fear in his eyes. Am I sick? Is there really someone else living inside me? I scrolled further. The entries grew shorter and more disjointed. Today I woke up and didn't recognize my hand. It was mine, but somehow it wasn't mine. Mark calls me different names. Sometimes Catherine, sometimes Laura. I don't know who I am. I'm scared. I'm losing myself. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking, so she felt it too. She didn't know who she was either. We were both vessels into which Mark poured his love, unaware that he was breaking them one by one. That evening, I sat in the kitchen, waiting for him to return from work. When he walked in, tired, holding a bouquet of lavender, I asked, "Who was I before you? Before the accident, before everything? Do you know?" He froze. The scent of lavender was too strong, cloying, like dry cleaning. "You were you," he finally said. "Enough." "No," I replied. "Not enough. I don't know which memories are mine and which are hers. I don't know if I love Basil or if she loves it. I don't know if I cry at night or if she cries inside me." He came over, knelt down, and took my hands in his. "I love you. Both of you. All of you. I don't care what your name is." I looked into his eyes, loving, devoted, crazy, and realized he truly didn't see the difference. For him, there was only one woman, and she was always with him. Laura, Catherine, just names. He loves her face, her body, her habits, but what's inside doesn't bother him. Perhaps he doesn't even notice that something is changing inside. I released my hands. "I'm leaving," I said. He didn't try to hold me back. He simply nodded, as if he'd been expecting it. "You'll come back," he said quietly. "She always comes back." I rented an apartment on the other side of town, a small studio with bare walls and a view of a parking lot. I covered the mirrors, threw out all the blue things, and stopped eating basil. At night, I woke up at 3:47 and lay there, listening to the silence. Sometimes I imagined a woman with my face, standing in the corner of the room, looking at me. She didn't turn on the light. I knew she was there, and I knew that one day she would come closer. A month ago, Mark called. His voice was joyful, almost drunk with happiness. "I met someone," he said. "Her name is Alice. You can't imagine Laura. She has your face. Exactly yours. The same eyes, the same birthmark. She doesn't remember her past. She says she lost her memory in the accident. I think it's a sign. I think she's back." I was silent. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line, quick, agitated. In the background, a female voice hummed a melody I didn't recognize. Or rather, I did. "Mark," I said slowly, "it's not her, and it's not me. It's just a woman like us. Let her go. Let us all go." He laughed. The laugh was light, almost carefree. "You don't understand. She remembers pasta with basil. She remembers Santa Monica. She even cries in her sleep, like you. Like Catherine. It's her. I know it." He hung up. I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the phone. In the reflection of the dark screen, I saw my face, or her face, or the face of that new woman named Alice. We all wore the same masks, and Mark found them again and again, not realizing that each time a new emptiness hid behind the mask. Last night, I woke up at 3:47 and went to the mirror. I tore down the newspapers. A woman with my face stared back at me from the depths of the glass. She was smiling, calmly, peacefully. I raised my hand. She raised hers, but this time without hesitation. Our palms touched through the cold glass. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I am you," she answered in my voice. "Or you are me. Or we are her. Or no one. What difference does it make? Mark will find us again. He always finds us." I pulled my hand back. An imprint remained on the glass. From the other side, I don't know who I am anymore, but I know that somewhere in Portland, there lives a woman named Alice with my face, who makes pasta with basil and doesn't remember her past. And every night, at 3:47, the three of us, Laura, Catherine, and Alice, wake up in different beds and look into different mirrors, but we see the same face. His face. The face he created to love forever. And I'm just one of them.